Not everything lasts. Ideas in particular come and go. Fads and fashions pass. This is the story of an idea that has endured for over 100 years. An idea so simple, no one thought to write it down for the first 30 years. Put simply, the idea is that service to humanity is the best work of life. This idea began with one man who saw his community for what it could be. This man was Henry Giesenbier Jr. Driven by a desire to achieve what others couldn't even imagine, Giesenbier was an enthusiast of civic service at the local level. He lived at the turn of the century in St. Louis, United States of America, a bustling town situated right in the center of the Midwest, full of hope and opportunity, but also the home of great social divide. According to one of Giesenbier's longtime friends, John Armbruster, he knew glory and he knew adversity, but he treated them both alike. He was not spoiled by glory, nor was he embittered by adversity. When others looked at his community of St. Louis and saw hardship, misfortune, and suffering, he looked beyond to see the possibility of happiness, prosperity, and peace. From within the walls of the soul of this organization, wherein the foundation of character and citizenship are laid, I hope a message will come forth in the sometime of tomorrow that will stir the people toward the establishment of a permanent and everlasting world peace. With that philosophy, a movement was born. A movement recognizing the powerful role of young people to bring about an everlasting peace, the JCI movement. The time to act is now. Membership in JCI is limited to the ages of 18 to 40, the time in life where Henry Giesenbier saw that people had great energy, but lacked the direction and opportunity for advancement. So, each person's opportunity to make a difference with JCI is purposefully limited. Along with John Armbruster and Andrew Mungenast, Giesenbier gathered 32 young men at the Mission Inn, a restaurant and club where his father was the head waiter. On that October 13th, in 1915, the desire to do something for themselves and their community led this group of young active citizens to initiate the JCI movement, first known as the Young Men's Progressive Civic Association, or YMPCA. And, like any movement that spans a century, name changes are in order. Later that year, the YMPCA became the Junior Citizens. It was under this name that the movement endured its first test, World War I. The war liberated a great wave of enthusiasm for action across the nation, and the Junior Citizens were no exception. Giesenbier, Andrew Mungenast, and hundreds of other Junior Citizen members embarked on a tour of duty with the United States Army. Giesenbier's 2 years of military service and time spent traveling war-torn Europe would be the catalyst to transform his ideas about community, peace, and equality for all humanity. Upon his return home, he realized that this movement was needed beyond the St. Louis community where it started, and had a vision that the movement would transcend borders, transform nations, and create everlasting peace. He and the early leaders of the movement harnessed the momentum that started the organization, known then as the St. Louis Junior Chamber of Commerce, to become a community pillar and quickly transform into a national operation. Soon, the leaders of the St. Louis Junior Chamber were receiving communications of interest from Dallas and New York City, and from as far as Canada, England, and New Zealand. Unfortunately, Giesenbier would not witness his vision come to completion. As a banker working during the 1929 market crash, the stress of the economic crisis caused his health to decline and ultimately led to his early death in 1935. His was a life that knew no resentment, though he was persecuted far beyond any that we have had to endure, reflected co-founder John Armbruster. It was Giesenbier's deep love of his community and his fellow man that drove him to stand up for the fellowship of humanity and peace between nations in the face of growing tensions locally, nationally, and globally. During the 1920s and 30s, the Junior Chamber grew not only in size but also in scope, creating several national campaigns for grassroots impact. Projects included the 50 Million Voters Campaign, also called Get Out the Vote. It originally ran in the 1920s and was the first ever systematic campaign to educate citizens of their responsibility to vote and contribute to the future of their country. The Americanism program was launched in response to the threat of communism, while the 10 Outstanding Young Men program recognized personal accomplishments in professional and civic matters. A conservation program spawned the National Wildlife Federation. They ran a campaign that promoted effective and efficient highway construction. Some projects reintegrated veterans into civilian life, and Operation Aeronautics innovated air travel and airmail. These are just a few examples of the grassroots efforts that created national impact in the JCI movement's first national organization. Another notable U.S. Junior Chamber campaign from the 1960s mounted a prominent and sustained effort to make seatbelts mandatory before they were a common feature in vehicles. Their initiative was so successful that road safety was transformed and millions of lives have been saved. As the growing number of United States Junior Chamber members continued to focus on service to their communities, the principal ideals of the movement continued to spread. As early as 1932, at the Los Angeles Summer Olympics, young citizens representing over 20 nations gathered to discuss formalizing the global movement into an international organization. However, it wasn't until the 1940s, amidst World War II, that Giesenbier's movement reached across enemy lines and appealed to the growing voices of young men who were demanding change. In the words of JCI Senator Verge LeBeau, JCI was formed in 1944, which has always surprised me. JCI members from the United States, Europe, Africa, and India were busy getting shot at and shooting back. The turmoil spread throughout the world. How JCI got off the ground in the midst of all that, I do not know. On December 11, 1944, in Mexico City at the Inter-American Congress, representatives from the United States and 8 Central American countries formed Junior Chamber International, with Raul Garcia Vidal of Mexico City elected as its first president. The first official international event received much publicity, as it was remarkable that these young men from multiple countries were mobilizing for peace during a time when nations were mobilizing for war. Undeniably, one of the things that has been most definitely proven by the present World War is that the decisions of the future will be in the hands of youth. And therefore, the results of the first Inter-American Conference should be of prime interest to all of us here in Mexico, as well as to the progressive peoples throughout the rest of the world. It was in that spirit that countless young men gave their time and energy to advance the JCI movement. At this time, the values uniting these men across the world were written by a young JCI member, William Brownfield, who recorded the words for members around the world. These 6 lines are today known as the JCI Creed.
We believe that faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life, that the brotherhood of man transcends the sovereignty of nations, that economic justice can best be won by free men through free enterprise, that government should be of laws rather than of men, that Earth's great treasure lies in human personality, and that service to humanity is the best work of life.
In the wake of 2 world wars, the JCI Creed acknowledged the failure of nation-states to build a just society and pushed for citizen-led solutions. With these unifying values solidified into a concise paragraph, the JCI movement swiftly spread around the world in communities everywhere. Today, JCI boasts nearly 200,000 members worldwide, active in 120 countries. And in that complex organization, one of the largest and most influential players is JCI Japan. In post-World War II society, Japan was in great need of rebuilding the nation and was largely shunned by the international community. JCI, with its creed of citizen-led local action, found a foothold in the post-World War II age. But in 1949, Japan was still viewed by many as the enemy. Nevertheless, young volunteers in Tokyo wanted to make a change and establish their own junior chamber, which was welcomed by the international organization. The movement has since spread all across Japan. The JCI movement continued to flourish in more countries and communities around the world. These JCI members first connected through dedication to self-improvement and service to the community, but those bonds were reinforced during parties and celebrations. Over the course of its history, the JCI movement has been perceived as many things by the community it serves: a social club, charity fundraising group, beer supplier, dating scene, and transformer of communities, to name a few. As JCI membership numbers swelled in the late 1950s, so too did the increased problems that come along with being an international organization in an increasingly globalized world. People were challenging unjust governmental policy and action, but within the organization, members faced barriers to enter and actively participate based on language, ethnicity, and gender. International meetings were becoming more and more complex, and as member nations grew, so did their requests for translation into more languages. This resulted in the JCI World publication being translated into 6 different languages, while proceedings at JCI events were translated into over a dozen languages. Members in Germany demonstrated that the Brotherhood of Man transcends the sovereignty of nations as they protested the existence of the Berlin Wall, demanding freedom for all citizens. Although JCI offered official equal opportunity to any race, nation, or gender, what national and local organizations put into practice was a whole different matter. Since its founding, the JCI movement had a role for women. Often wives of the young members managed projects and events, did record keeping, and much more behind the scenes. From editing speeches to baking goods for fundraisers to giving up their homes as meeting spaces, women had a very important, although often ignored, role to play in achieving Giesenbier's vision of everlasting peace. In many countries, the JCI movement was a space for women to exercise their full rights as active citizens. But in other nations, including the United States, women were given a separate and not always equal role in the organization. JCI senator and wife of a longtime member, Mary Sawyer, reflects on the changing role of women in the organization.
When you look at the way JC's was done across the world as a co-ed organization, and the U.S. was totally different. I went to World Congress in 1981 when the women's issue was just really beginning to heat up in the U.S. And it was like, oh my God, there are women here who are on equal footing with the men. And not only are they on equal footing, but they were leaders.
Soon, working behind the scenes wasn't enough. Women wanted the right to vote, hold leadership positions, and be officially recognized for creating positive change. They eventually achieved their goals and officially earned the right to be full members in every national organization. The world was changing. Women were gaining equality, and JCI needed to be on the forefront of that movement. The search for equality led to organizational changes. But were these changes for the better or worse? Between 1978, when the organization was at its all-time high in membership with over 600,000 active citizens worldwide, and 1999, the organization's membership declined to less than 250,000 individuals. JCI has lost membership whenever and wherever it has lost its way. The membership only grows and thrives when we have a clear sense of direction. When the values of the creed are ignored and members serve themselves rather than their community, local organizations wither and die. But more important than the numbers is the impact the organization makes. Over time, JCI's dedication to local service, to results-based action, and to the equality of all people became so ingrained in the culture that the UN recognized JCI as a partner in advancing the Millennium Development Goals. Starting in 2004 through 2015, JCI local organizations worldwide instituted thousands of local programs to target these 8 development goals. The time-bound goals aim to eradicate extreme poverty by targeting income inequality, hunger, disease, lack of adequate shelter, and exclusion, while promoting gender equality, education, and environmental sustainability. JCI members in Cameroon contributed to reducing the rate of child deaths from malaria by providing insecticide-treated bed nets, testing for malaria, and administering proper treatment for families in need. After realizing the poor conditions of a local primary school, members in Colombia donated art supplies and painted murals to provide a creative outlet for students and get them excited about learning again. Members of JCI Belgium tackled youth unemployment as local businesses closed their doors by giving entrepreneurs the opportunity to turn their business ideas into a reality. JCI Cambodia collaborated with local government and sponsors to provide water wells, providing rural communities access to clean water. Though projects advancing the Millennium Development Goals have a wide range, their collective impact decreased poverty across the globe. Today's membership is lower than it has been in the past, but significantly more diverse, making JCI more flexible and ready to meet the demands of the next century. Those demands are great. To achieve Giesenbeer's vision of peace, we must persist in eliminating the obstacles. Working together and following the global goals for sustainable development as a guide, young people can end extreme poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and fix climate change. Natural disasters will continue to strike human society without warning, and we will be called to respond. Social inequality continues to hinder people's opportunities. We will be compelled to take action. Climate change deteriorates the Earth, drastically transforming our idea of the future. We will be there. Our movement will persist in its journey to achieve everlasting world peace. What is in a movement? A movement comes about with risk, faith, hard work. It is driven by principle, by idealism, leadership, commitment, and integrity. Young people have the power to create an everlasting peace. Striving for that peace gives us direction and meaning in life. The ideals and ideas that founded JCI will continue to see it grow and thrive. We've not solved the Earth's problems because challenges and difficulties are more certain than success. Today, members engage in projects worldwide, tackling the global goals for sustainable development. Human rights, environmental conservation, democracy, entrepreneurship, ethical behavior. We have seen progress, and we are ready to do more.